Zelensky, save your men from Bakhmut. Look at the map behind me. Save your army. It's not too late to let them retreat in good order. It's time to pull out, or you'll regret this decision for the next 18 years. Thousands of proud Ukrainian soldiers are waiting for your command because every hour the window of opportunity is shrinking. And like that we can avoid a repeat of Stalingrad. But nope, all these men will be sacrificed.
Здавати Бахмут ніхто не буде. Будемо боротися скільки можемо. Вважаємо Бахмут нашою фортецею. Ми не тільки не відійдемо від Бахмуту.
Madness, Commander.
This is madness.
And before you ask how many more videos I'm going to make about Bakhmut, yes, I'll be honest, I had a beautiful video prepared about Bakhmut, but from the Ukrainian perspective, where we would explore multiple options available to the Ukrainian army to avoid a resounding defeat. Well, because of the latest developments, that entire video went to... My friends, look at the current situation in Bakhmut. As you can see, the Russians now control the MO3 highway and the T0504 road. What a disaster! As a reminder, here's the situation on February 1st and the current situation. February 1st, current. One last time, February 1st, and now. Courtesy of Defense Politics Asia and his excellent map. Oh, but the Ukrainians are celebrating. Here's a footage of a Russian human wave. Did you see? You can count hundreds of KIA. At least. And look, here we threw some grenades at waves of incoming orcs. And here are all the places we bombarded the formations from Mordor. Now back to reality. So here are all the roads leading into Bakhmut. But there are also two smaller roads that nobody paid attention to. In total, there are 6 roads, which I color-coded for you. So we have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. There's some massive fog of war. So I'll try my best to explain the tactical and operational situation with the information I have available. We know that the Russians took physical control of Red Road since the 27th of January. The Ukrainian shelling in this sector was so effective that the Russians have now captured the Orange Highway, or at least made it unusable. All the orchestra have to do is position their Cornet anti-tank missiles and shoot anything moving up and down the road. How do we know this? Because land forces of Ukraine reported fighting in these two villages, Orikhovo-Vasilivska and Dubovo-Vasilivska. And using this color-coded map, it's obvious that Wagner is aiming to storm the Yellow Road. So the goal of this northern breakthrough, this hook, was lined red, orange, and yellow. Now don't think that the Ukrainians are just sitting and waiting. Reports mentioned 5 Ukrainian counterattacks, each involving around 40 men, supported by 2 armored personnel carriers. But these have been halted by a storm of steel. Question: where are the Ukrainian reserves? Now, Orange Road is also threatened at this location because of this Russian bridgehead over the Bakhmutka River. And now, magic! The orchestra can link up with their musician comrades right here, which would surround the Ukrainian defenders at Paraskovivka and Krasnaora. Here you can see a Ukrainian BTR supporting the attack of friendly infantrymen in an attempt to counterattack against this Russian bridgehead. Now in the southwest of Bakhmut, according to a pro-Ukrainian map, Deep State, the Wagner musicians were 775 meters away from Purple Road and fighting at the outskirts of Ivanivske. But as of the 10th of February, the orchestra took physical control of the Purple Road and of the entire forest west of the canal. They're now positioned right in between Ivanivske, Chasiv and Stupochki. In small groups, Wagnerians are using the cover of forests to infiltrate Ukrainian positions, bypass enemy strongholds to push as far as possible. The lack of armored support means they have speed, but it can become problematic if targeted by Ukrainian artillery. Here you can see a Ukrainian tank firing at a tree line where Russian infantrymen regrouped before mounting an assault. Now with full control over Purple Road, the question is, what next? Thing is, we don't know the exact strength of both sides in this sector. But since we know that Wagner is using the forest west of Ivaniske to bypass the town, this would lead them directly to Blue Road. Look at all the forested areas along this way. This is perfect Wagner terrain. And they could cut any traffic along this axis as well. If they have the strength, they could even go straight to the city center of Chasiv Yar. So, in summary, red, orange, and purple are no-go zones. Yellow is threatened, blue might be targeted, only green road remains.
Fuck.
There are thousands of men in Bakhmut. How can the Ukrainians avoid an encirclement? If they don't evacuate now, all these Ukrainian soldiers will be evacuated to Siberia. Phase 1 of the Ukrainian withdrawal should be to pull back all the units from the east bank of Bakhmut and use the Bakhmutka River as a natural line of defense to slow down the Russians. Same maneuver in the north. Withdraw your men from the east side of the river, that is, everyone defending Krasnaora. Ukrainians could also mine the entire area while withdrawing. At the same time, send lots of reinforcements into the salients to protect the flanks. This is very important. Phase 2, retreat from the urban area of Bakhmut towards the high ground of Khomove and use the hills to fire at advancing Russian units. Then in the north, it would be time to withdraw from Paraskovivka. Phase 3 would be the most important. Straighten the front line and center your defense on Chasiv Yar, with your main line of defense along the canal on this ridgeline, which can easily be supplied from the west. This would allow the Ukrainian army to complete the objective of slowing down the Russian army until the spring, while at the same time allow Ukraine to salvage its forces to fight another day. Welcome to History Legends. Hold on, let's do it with the shades. Welcome to History Legends. Here are the latest news of the Russo-Ukrainian War. Remember that if you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And now a quick word from today's sponsor. I'm presenting you today's sponsor, Masterworks. The war in Ukraine continues to escalate and we continue to feel the ripple effects. Energy prices, food prices, all still skyrocketing by the day, driving record inflation. Inflation that's also impacting our 401k, our portfolios, chipping away at our financial futures. Well, now is the time to try to take action, because experts are projecting 2023 to be just as bad. So do what I do and listen to financial experts and savvy investors. They're seeking refuge in one of history's longest standing stores of wealth, fine art. The global rich still view masterpiece art as an hedge against inflation, and perhaps a safer store of value than stocks and crypto. But finally, you don't need to be a member of the global rich to get in on the action. Thanks to our friend Masterworks. Masterworks is an award-winning fintech platform in New York City's financial district that lets you invest in museum-grade artwork for a fraction of the cost. World-famous artists like Picasso, Banksy, and Monet. And speaking of money, get it? They recently returned tens of millions in total to investors, with their last 3 sales delivering 10, 13, and 35% net returns to their investors. With performance like that, demand is surging. And over 617,000 people have signed up so far, meaning offerings can sell out in minutes. But right now, History Legends subscribers can skip the waitlist. So don't miss out, just click the link in the description now. Thank you to all of you that have already supported me on Patreon or PayPal, and welcome to the headquarters. Low morale in Bakhmut. The battle for Bakhmut has been ongoing for 3 months non-stop. If we take a look at a deployment map of the Ukrainian army, I can count 16 brigades involved in the defense of Bakhmut, roughly 25% of Ukraine's forces on the front line, or equivalent to 80,000 men if those brigades are at full strength. That's basically the size of all the British ground forces on a 45-kilometer front. Now among these 16 brigades, 7 are defending Bakhmut proper, or 35,000 men. In theory, remember Green Road that I mentioned earlier? That's the last supply route and last road that the garrison could use to escape from the Bakhmut cauldron. The most optimistic reports mention that 5 to 6,000 Ukrainians could be trapped in an encirclement if no withdrawal is ordered. What would be the political effect for Ukraine to announce to their population that they lost once again 5 to 10,000 men as prisoners of war? And Ukrainian troops are not oblivious at what's happening. Because Ukrainian troops know what's actually going on, their morale is at the lowest. Have a look at this story from French reporters of France 24.
On the ground, Ukrainian troops are pessimistic about the situation.
The situation is very difficult for us. The Russians are surrounding Bakhmut.
Their faces marked by exhaustion and anxiety.
The Russians are so numerous. They look like ants advancing while pushing us back. It's hard to keep our soldiers alive and to hold on psychologically.
Meanwhile, Reddit trolls kept mocking Wagner and its suicide squads. But Ukraine does the exact same thing with their newly conscripted troops.
Розмовляла з хлопцями, які вивозять наших 200-х і 300-х. І вони сказали, що непідготовлений боєць, от за їх рейтингом, живе в Бахмуті 4 години.
На передовій?
Так.
Ну, це така дуже негативна яка статистика. Мені здається, довше.
And check out what this Ukrainian soldier in Bakhmut had to say, knowing that by posting this video to inform you, he puts his life in danger.
І що я можу сказати? В самому пеклі, блядь. Якщо, блядь, пару днів, блядь, нас не виведуть, нам всіх пизда. Уже майже половини людей нема. Ніхуя у нас нема. Артилерії нема. Нас цеплять мінами, блядь, пизда. Кольцо скоро закриється. І нам пизда. Ось така ситуація в Бахмуті.
Here's another video, a soldier of the 10th Mountain Brigade, complaining that his company has been disbanded and distributed to other units. And he ends up by saying they just need more meat. We can wonder how many times this has happened to other units. But once again, question, where are the Ukrainian reserves? Or have a look at this last video. It's 5 minutes long, so I'll summarize the entire situation. Essentially, the guys with the green armbands are recently enlisted Ukrainian Mobiks, who were sent directly to the Bakhmut meat grinder. The Mobiks were tactically retreating and were stopped by an officer of the Ukrainian NKVD, which you can identify with his different uniform. Follows a heated argument. He tells them to go back. The Mobiks say it does not make sense from a military perspective to fight for this position. They say there are only 7 of them left. They just can't take it anymore. They're exhausted. They're freezing, suffering from frostbite. They haven't eaten for days. And then ask, where are all the other 500 men of our battalion to take that position instead of us? To which the NKVD officer replies, there's no one else. Then we learn that the 1st battalion they're part of is actually a ghost battalion. The battalion essentially ceased to exist as a fighting formation. We can hear them say no one is responding. Some are dead, but the majority is simply not fighting anymore. They're just hiding in cellars, bunkers and basements to avoid Russian shelling. From a historical perspective, it's very similar once again to the siege of Dien Bien Phu. Many French battalions defending the area became ghost battalions, with only 25% of the regular manpower available. Most wounded soldiers went to the rear and never returned to the front. Now imagine hundreds of men, thousands, from all units mixed up, all nationalities, just sitting in trenches waiting for the battle to end. There was no more command structure and morale was at the lowest. On top of that, many able-bodied men simply hid for weeks in dugouts and trenches. After the surrender of the garrison, when the Viet Minh entered the camp, they were shocked to find out that they had captured 11,000 prisoners, of which only about 3,000 managed to return home. One can wonder what would have happened to this battle had all these men fought until the end, instead of dying in prison camps. Last stand. So I have to admit, all these ghost battalions make a planned withdrawal much more complicated. Now for me, the tragedy. Out of the 7 brigades fighting in Bakhmut proper, 5 are part of the territorial defense or the National Guard. Mobilized men with little training sent in to fill the casualties, aka cannon fodder. But for Ukraine, this is a much better trade-off than to reenact what happened at Mariupol, when they let elite formations of the Ukraine army like Azov and the Ukrainian Marines get encircled. This seems to confirm the rumors that the more trained formations were withdrawn from Bakhmut, whereas less trained units, mobilized personnel, are kept on the front line to bear the brunt of the artillery shelling and basically be the ones sacrificed in case of an encirclement. So for the Ukrainian general staff, instead of trying to withdraw these men, which could cause a complete collapse and a rout of the entire Ukrainian army, they thought it was better to just have these second-tier units just stand their ground and try to defend their positions as long as possible with whatever they have available. I'm not saying it's a good or bad strategy, I'm just reporting on what's happening. It's tragic, but this very pragmatic solution was perhaps the best of the worst scenarios. Perhaps like that, these Ukrainian mobilized personnel can hold off Wagner assault units for a couple more weeks. This Wagner soldier says that every building in Bakhmut is like a fortress. They have to deal with snipers, machine guns, and artillery fire. Russian forces have to bombard every single block, sometimes using mobile mortar crews that disembark from the AFV to fire the mortar and then quickly return to safety to avoid counter-battery fire. Only then can Wagner assault units attempt to storm enemy positions. How would all these Ukrainian soldiers be transported to the rear is also another question. A lot of Ukrainian armored vehicles like this M113 APC have been destroyed over time through battle attrition. If you look at this footage, many Ukrainian units are left with only civilian pickup trucks or vans, if they're lucky, which explains all the videos we saw of Ukrainian soldiers simply leaving the area on foot and in small groups to avoid getting detected by Russian drones. Because of that, the Ukrainian objective is to hold off the Russians at Bakhmut as long as possible until their mechanized formations are ready to launch their spring offensive. At the rear, we see Ukrainians unloading new armored vehicles and trucks that were transported by rail. These will go on to strengthen Ukrainian mechanized brigades. These were most likely repaired and patched up somewhere in the Czech Republic by Czech technicians and engineers, which are among the only ones in Europe that know how to handle this Soviet equipment. Here we can see the Canadian donation of Leopard 2s being sent to Ukraine. Meanwhile, the British Prime Minister said that the Challenger 2s will be sent to Ukraine by March. Here you can see Ukrainian tank crews of the 25th Airborne and 80th Air Assault Brigades currently in the United Kingdom learning how to operate British tanks. So yeah, it's a big gamble. At the risk of losing 10 or even 20, 30,000 men, KA, wounded or captured just to prove a point for a political commitment before your spring offensive. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support this channel, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The link's in the description.